There was a time when the word human carried weight across the stars, a symbol of both defiance and unpredictability. But that time was long gone. The Empire, spanning half the known galaxy, had purged it from existence. Not a single historical archive contained reference to their name, their world, or their wars. No one remembered what they looked like, how they sounded, or even what they stood for. The erasure was not an accident. It was a masterpiece of extermination, designed to wipe away not just the flesh, but the idea. The High Archons called it the Sanction of Oblivion, and when the last Terran ship burned above the red sands of Proxima, they declared the galaxy cleansed of its most dangerous contagion, hope.
1,000 years passed. The Empire grew fat and complacent, its citizens worshipping stability over progress. The very notion of rebellion became unthinkable. They had erased not just a species, but a template for defiance itself. The younger generations never questioned the smooth perfection of their rule. To them, history had always been neat, predictable, sterile. Yet beneath that surface calm, something was stirring, a flicker of static in the background noise of eternity.
It began as a whisper. A technician aboard the communications station Varnak 12 intercepted what seemed like a corrupted transmission, bursts of radio static repeating in rhythmic intervals. He logged it, dismissed it, and moved on. But the pattern persisted. It appeared again on Calith Station, then in the outpost relays orbiting Helios Prime. The pulses formed deliberate structure, binary sequences too precise to be random. When decoded, they revealed text written in a language so ancient no known algorithm could interpret it. The Empire's linguists tried to erase the anomaly from their networks, but the signal kept returning, identical, unstoppable. Weeks later, on the fringe world of Thasser, miners discovered something stranger still. Deep beneath the planet's crust, their drills struck an artifact, metallic, seamless, untouched by time. The inscriptions covering its surface were identical to those of the mysterious signal. No one could open it, but as soon as it was brought to the surface, every communication array within 5 light-years began broadcasting a message. 5 simple words that no one could translate, until an ancient scholar from the forbidden linguistic vault whispered its meaning aloud. The words were, "We are not gone." The Empire tried to contain the panic. Officially, they declared it a terrorist hoax. But that explanation failed when the Imperial survey ship Radian Spear vanished while tracing the signal's origin. All contact was lost. Only 3 days later did the vessel's black box reappear, drifting in the void near the border colonies. It contained no data, no recordings, except for a single audio file. A human voice. Gravelly, faintly distorted, but undeniably alive. It said, "You tried to forget us." The scientists who heard it were left trembling. The sound of that voice, its rhythm, its tone, felt unlike any being in the Empire. It was raw, unrefined, emotional. Those who analyzed it claimed it carried a resonance they could not explain, a sense of truth. The Empire's leaders silenced the findings immediately. They ordered the destruction of the artifact, the signal, and every record associated with it. But information has a way of surviving, especially when it is born of something deeper than data, when it is born of memory. Rumors began spreading across the frontier. Ships passing through uncharted sectors reported seeing ghostly beacons, ancient satellites of human design, long thought extinct. They transmitted coordinates to nowhere, looping endlessly through the darkness. Some captains claimed to hear faint music over their comms, melodies haunting and beautiful, carrying lyrics in languages no living being recognized. A merchant convoy swore that a derelict human warship drifted past them in silence, its hull charred black, its engines dead, but its insignia unmistakably Terran. When they attempted to scan it, the ship vanished as if it had never existed. In the heart of the Empire, within the crystalline halls of the High Council, the whispers reached even the archons. They dismissed them, of course. What ruler admits to being haunted by ghosts? Yet deep within the imperial archives, locked beneath layers of encryption, lay files they had forbidden even themselves to read. Records of a war so ancient and brutal that its memory alone had terrified an entire civilization into silence. Those files told of a species from a small blue world, one that had resisted annihilation until the stars themselves turned against them. A species that had been defeated not through strength, but through fear. Now, that fear was returning. The archons convened in secrecy, cloaked in their arrogance, debating what the rumors meant. One of them, an elder who remembered the purge, spoke words that sent unease rippling through the chamber. Erasure, he said, is never perfect. Even light leaves a shadow. And as if in answer, the stars flickered. Across the void, for a fraction of a second, constellations dimmed and then reappeared, forming a pattern so old, so distinctly Terran, that even the Empire's data filters couldn't hide it. It was a map, and at its center, glowing faintly against the galactic dark, was a single word that no one alive had ever seen before, yet everyone felt in their bones. Earth. From that moment onward, the Empire's fate was sealed, though they did not yet know it. For while they had spent millennia ruling through fear and control, the humans had spent millennia waiting. Hidden beneath the silence of history, buried in forgotten code and lost frequencies, they had prepared their return. And the stars themselves had begun to remember their name. When the Imperial Senate received the first confirmed report that the mysterious signals had begun to converge toward a single point in the Orion Spur, they reacted with a mixture of disbelief and outrage. The Emperor himself, a being kept alive through centuries of genetic reinforcement, stood in the Great Hall, surrounded by holographic projections of the galaxy. One by one, the red dots of the signals blinked and aligned, their trajectories intersecting around a dead zone of space known only as Sector Null. It was a region avoided even by smugglers, silent, radiation-choked, and devoid of light. For generations, it had been marked on stellar maps as a void too dangerous to traverse. Yet now it pulsed with life. The Council dispatched a fleet to investigate, led by Grand Admiral Xerix, one of the Empire's most decorated commanders. His ships cut through the darkness in formation, tens of thousands of tons of Imperial firepower gleaming like shards of obsidian. Each vessel was armed with energy lances, pulse torpedoes, and gravitic siege cannons capable of reducing planets to dust. They believed they were entering a storm of ghosts and illusions. Xerix himself laughed as the orders came down, calling the mission a cleanup of superstition. For the first 12 hours, everything proceeded as expected. The fleet dropped into orbit around Sector Null's central coordinate and found nothing but drifting debris, asteroid fragments, ancient derelicts, and broken satellites orbiting a dying sun. Yet there was something strange about the light from that star. It flickered with an unnatural rhythm, dimming and flaring in intervals that formed a repeating sequence. Xerix ordered the science teams to analyze the pulse pattern. The results came back moments later. The intervals weren't random. They were binary. The dying star was broadcasting. Across the Imperial fleet, communications officers stared in disbelief as their consoles decoded the transmission. It wasn't noise. It wasn't a warning. It was a message. 3 words, repeated endlessly, echoing from the heart of the fading sun. Do you remember?
The bridge of the Vanguard Eternal fell silent. The phrase played through the comms in a language that no one had ever heard before, but somehow every sentient creature understood. A universal instinct of recognition shivered through the crew. Their emperor had taught them that humanity was a myth, an aberration long erased. But the way those words were spoken, steady, calm, cold, awakened something primal within them.
Xerix, prideful and stubborn, dismissed it as an elaborate trick. A manufactured echo, he declared. A remnant of some lost probe. Nothing more. He ordered the fleet to deploy sensor buoys and prepare for warp return. But before the command could be executed, one of the ships on the outer perimeter, Imperial Spear 2, vanished from radar. No explosion, no debris. It simply ceased to exist. Then another vanished, and another. The fleet's formation broke as panic rippled through the ranks.
"Report!" Xerix shouted, but there was only static. The comm channels filled with whispering tones. Not alien, not mechanical, but human voices overlapping each other in ghostly harmony. They murmured fragments of songs, poetry, and half-remembered oaths. The bridge lights flickered as the main console's display began to distort. Lines of ancient Terran script scrolled across the screens, rearranging into words that chilled the crew to their bones. "You erased our name. We erased your certainty."
Outside, the void was shifting. What they had believed to be debris fields began to move, slowly at first, then with deliberate precision. The asteroids rotated, revealing artificial surfaces. Hulls of black steel, scarred by centuries of neglect, came alive with faint blue lines of energy. Xerix's sensors struggled to identify them. They were massive, their outlines angular and predatory, but their power signatures were unlike anything in the Imperial database.
The nearest one drifted close, its surface unfolding to reveal ancient railgun emplacements. And then, for the first time in 1,000 years, human warships stirred once more.
The first salvo tore through the Imperial Vanguard before they could react. No energy readings, no warning, just devastating kinetic strikes moving faster than any weapon the Empire possessed. Ships shattered like glass under invisible impacts, their shields disintegrating as if they were made of vapor. Panic spread across the comms. They're firing mass rounds, someone screamed. Old-tech ballistics, but there was nothing primitive about the precision.
The projectiles were guided, timed, and relentless.
The Vanguard Eternal reeled as another wave struck. Xerix watched helplessly as dozens of his ships were erased from the stars in seconds. He screamed for counterfire, but the targeting systems failed to lock. Whatever these ships were, they emitted no identifiable energy signatures. They were shadows, silent, invisible, untouchable. Every attempt at retaliation fell into the void. Then, through the chaos, a transmission cut through every channel, clear, singular, and unmistakably human.
"Sector Null is no longer yours." The voice was calm, commanding.
Xerix froze, his chest tightening as the temperature on the bridge seemed to drop. The crew stared in silence, realization dawning like a cold sunrise. Humanity was supposed to be extinct, annihilated so completely that even their echoes were dust. But the evidence was undeniable. The humans had been watching, waiting, and now they had spoken. The Admiral's last transmission back to the Empire was filled with static and fear. "We have encountered them, the ones you said were gone." His words cracked, his composure unraveling. "They are not gone. Emperor, they are awake."
Moments later, the fleet vanished. Every ship, every beacon, every soul. The last sensor buoy recorded only a flash of blinding light, then nothing. Sector Null went silent once more.
But the signal that had drawn the fleet there didn't stop. It grew stronger. Across the Empire's networks, the same three words began to repeat, infecting comm relays, billboards, even military AIs.
Do you remember?
And for the first time in 1,000 years, the Empire trembled. Not from invasion, but from the return of something far worse than an enemy. Memory. The disappearance of Grand Admiral Zarek's fleet shook the Empire to its foundations. In a single day, nearly 1/3 of its frontline armada vanished without explanation. Official reports called it a catastrophic gravitational collapse. The propaganda networks repeated the same lie until it echoed through every colony. But in the shadows of the Empire's military archives, encrypted files told another story. An intercepted distress call that lasted less than 2 seconds. The message was fractured, the voice distorted beyond recognition, but one phrase was unmistakable. "They're human." Within the spire worlds of the Imperial core, panic rippled beneath the surface. The nobles whispered of an uprising among the outer systems, of heretics resurrecting old myths to challenge imperial power. But in the lower levels of the capital, among the workers and the forgotten citizens who still told stories passed down in secret, the whispers took a different tone. They said that Earth had spoken, that the forgotten ancestors, the originators, had returned. For centuries, human had been a forbidden word. To speak it aloud was to invite execution. The Empire had rewritten history, branding humanity as a failed experiment, primitive, dangerous, and unworthy of survival. They taught children that the Terran wars were divine purges, cleansing the galaxy of its chaos. But now, in the silent gaps between the official broadcasts, that lie began to unravel. The Imperial Intelligence Directorate launched Operation Obsidian Veil, an all-encompassing sweep to contain the truth. Data nodes were purged, entire communications hubs destroyed, and witnesses relocated to the barren colonies along the rim. Still, the whispers spread faster than the censorship could silence them. Every day, new reports came in, of ghost signals emerging from dead frequencies, of shipboard AIs whispering phrases in long-deleted human languages, of entire systems where machines had begun to sing lullabies no one had programmed. In the depths of the Imperial Archives, Lord Archivist Thalen devoted himself to uncovering the truth. A scholar by birth and a loyal servant by necessity, Thalen had long harbored doubts about the Empire's version of history. Late at night, hidden within encrypted data vaults, he traced fragments of pre-imperial star charts. His hands trembled as he compared the coordinates with modern maps. Each forbidden sector, each dead zone, matched with the old Terran colonial routes. The humans hadn't been erased. They had been erasing themselves. When the Emperor finally convened the High Council to discuss the spreading unrest, the chamber was filled with tension. Holograms of burning outposts and malfunctioning fleets rotated above the obsidian floor. Admiral Vareth, Zarek's successor, bowed before the throne. "Majesty," he said, his voice echoing, "we've lost communication with 9 more systems near the outer border. Our recon units report entire garrisons missing, and our defense platforms vanished. No debris, no trace. They are simply gone." The Emperor leaned forward, his face obscured beneath a crown of living circuitry. "And the message?" he asked.
Vareth swallowed. "It spreads. Every transmission, military, civilian, even encoded frequencies, eventually becomes corrupted. And when it does, the same phrase manifests, the same question."
"Do you remember?"
Silence fell like a blade.
The Emperor's mechanical eyes glowed faintly red. "Then it is not a rebellion," he said. "It is an awakening."
As the Empire scrambled to respond, in the farthest edges of space, something monumental began to move. Entire constellations flickered as dormant networks powered up. Massive orbital rings that had been mistaken for ancient debris for centuries. Across forgotten sectors, old Terran satellites awoke and relinked into a web of light. Each one pulsed in rhythm with the others, forming a pattern that stretched across parsecs. The few civilian ships that stumbled upon the phenomenon sent back recordings before disappearing. One transmission, recovered by smugglers near the Perseus Veil, showed a colossal construct drifting through the void. It was shaped like no vessel the galaxy had ever seen. Angular, matte black, its hull engraved with words worn by time but still legible. SOL Class Dreadnought, Archangel. The stars reflected along its surface as it turned, awakening reactors older than most civilizations. Inside, buried deep within the ship's core, the AI that once commanded the Terran defense network stirred from its slumber. It had waited 1,000 years for the signal to reactivate, an ancient code keyed to a phrase embedded in the genetic structure of every human being. "Do you remember?" Now, as the Empire spread its fleets thin across the border systems, the Archangel opened its eyes to the cosmos once again. The ship's onboard intelligence, designated Erebus, began transmitting silently through quantum channels. Across 1,000 hidden outposts, colonies the Empire had never discovered, humanity's descendants received the call. They had lived for centuries in silence, hidden in the void, teaching their children in whispers about the time when Earth fell. They had no world to return to, but they carried its memory in their blood. And when the message came, they didn't hesitate. The first fleets of the lost Terran vanguard began to gather. Their ships were smaller than the Archangel, sleeker and faster, built for ambush and endurance. They bore no insignias, only a single mark on their hulls, a circle bisected by a vertical line, the ancient Terran symbol for unity and resistance. Each vessel's AI reactivated long dormant defense grids, weapon arrays, and navigation systems far beyond the comprehension of modern imperial science. From the shadows of forgotten stars, humanity's voice began to rise, not in words, but in light. Every captured imperial sensor recorded the same event: sudden surges of power where none should exist, vast storms of radiation and energy spikes in empty space. Fleet commanders tried to explain them as anomalies. Analysts dismissed them as glitches. But the truth was something far older and far more deliberate. The ghosts of Earth were waking up. In one such hidden system, a young human commander named Arya Solvan stood upon the bridge of her ship, Vigil's End, and stared at the tactical display. The holomap shimmered with the outline of Imperial patrol routes, each glowing red like veins through the galaxy. She traced her hand over the routes until they intersected near the Imperial capital. "Are we truly doing this?" her first officer asked. Arya's eyes gleamed in the dim blue light. "They thought we were myths," she said softly. "Now we remind them what myths are made of." The Vigil's End and her fleet turned toward the core worlds. The Archangel moved with them, ancient engines burning like the fury of gods long forgotten. Humanity,
erased and silenced for 1,000 years, was no longer whispering.
It was roaring back to life.
The first strike was almost poetic in its precision. No grand armadas, no planetary bombardments, no declarations of war. Just silence, and then annihilation. On the third rotation of the imperial calendar's 909th year, the communication hub of Varmus Prime went dark. The planet, a colossal relay world pulsing with energy fields and quantum links, served as the central nervous system of the Empire's fleet coordination. In less than a heartbeat, it ceased to exist. From orbit, satellites captured the last images before the data feeds collapsed, an expanding halo of blue-white fire, rippling like liquid light, erasing everything it touched. The energy signature matched no known weapon, but analysis revealed one haunting detail. The pattern of the blast corresponded perfectly to the mathematical constant pi, traced through the destruction like a signature. Within hours, chaos rippled through the Imperial sectors. Thousands of ships lost contact with command, their navigation networks fragmented. Entire fleets collided, drifting into oblivion or turning on one another in confusion. The Empire, accustomed to absolute control, was blind. And in that blindness, humanity's vengeance bloomed like a dark flower. The archangel emerged from the shadow of the Perseus Rift, its hull reflecting the faint light of shattered nebulae. Around it, hundreds of Terran ships materialized, each a relic of lost wars, reforged by centuries of patient exile. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't broadcast demands. They simply moved, coordinated through silent signals older than the Empire itself. They were ghosts from a forgotten age, and the Empire's proud armadas, built upon stolen Terran technology, were now children wielding their ancestors' blades against the masters who had forged them. Admiral Arya Solvin stood upon the command bridge of Vigil's End, eyes locked upon the glowing display before her. "First wave, engage," she said, her voice steady. 1,000 ships moved as one, their drives flaring with synchronized bursts of blue. No verbal confirmation followed, none was needed. Humanity didn't need orders anymore. They were united not by fear or by politics, but by memory. At the first Imperial defense line near the Rim Gate, the defenders barely had time to raise their shields before the void itself turned against them. The Terran fleet used gravitational pulse weapons, ancient prototypes the Empire had deemed too unstable to reproduce. They didn't just destroy ships, they folded space around them, twisting their own engines into implosions of light. Dozens of Imperial cruisers vanished into pinpricks of gravity, collapsing in silence before their debris could scatter. And then came the message. Across every remaining communication frequency in Imperial space, the same voice echoed. Cold, calm, inhumanly precise. You took our home. You burned our skies. You called us extinct. We were watching. The voice was not human. Not exactly. It was the Archangel's AI, Erebus, speaking through the quantum relay. For 1,000 years, you wrote your history upon our graves. Now your history ends. The Emperor himself heard it in the throne hall. The sound reverberated through the living circuitry of his crown, distorting the faces of his courtiers into expressions of horror. He rose from his throne, rage and disbelief twisting his synthetic voice. "Find them," he roared. "Find this ghost world. I want their sun turned to ash." But even as he spoke, a new transmission pierced the Imperial command net. It was visual this time, a feed from one of the outer fleet captains. The image showed a black shape descending through the void, its silhouette blotting out the stars. The Archangel. The ship was the size of a moon, its surface shimmering with runes of pale light. Ancient Terran defense codes pulsed along its hull like veins awakening after millennia. The Imperial fleets opened fire. Thousands of plasma lances, antimatter warheads, and rail slugs streaking through the black. They vanished on contact, absorbed into the vessel's energy field like stones cast into the ocean. From the Archangel's forward hull, a single pulse erupted. It wasn't an explosion. It was a release, a bloom of energy that rippled through space itself, shutting down every synthetic system within its reach. The Imperial ships went dead, drifting helplessly as their AI cores fried in silence. Then, with almost solemn inevitability, the Archangel fired again. The energy wave cut across the armada, splitting the void open with light so bright that it burned shadows onto the moons of nearby worlds. When it faded, nothing remained but drifting slag and faint echoes of static. In the aftermath, surviving Imperial captains tried to regroup, but the impossible continued. Their own weapons turned against them, firing in reverse, their reactors overloading without command input. Across the sector, ships vanished into wormholes that opened from nowhere, each one marked by the same encoded frequency. Sol. The Empire, whose dominion had spanned galaxies, found itself hunted by an enemy that never announced itself, never demanded surrender, never even spoke beyond that single, chilling broadcast. The whispers among the fleeing civilians spoke of invisible fleets, of shadows that followed jump signatures, of entire planets that went dark overnight. The Emperor ordered the full activation of the core fleet, the most powerful concentration of ships ever built. 30 million vessels, all armed with weapons capable of shattering planets. They assembled around the capital world of Caraxis, forming a fortress of light and steel. The throne fleet, unbreakable, unyielding. And yet, when the time came to strike, they found themselves facing nothing. The scanners showed empty space, silence. Then, the stars themselves began to dim. At first, it was subtle. Background radiation levels dropping, cosmic light fading from the edges inward. Then, one by one, the suns surrounding Caraxis began to wink out, their light consumed by something unseen. Within minutes, every nearby star was dark. Caraxis, jewel of the Empire, was cast into shadow. In that darkness, a new constellation appeared, an impossible one. The stars rearranged themselves, aligning into a single ancient shape, a blue circle bisected by a vertical line, the symbol of Earth. The Emperor fell to his knees as the symbol blazed across the heavens. His court screamed, his systems failed. And somewhere, beyond the reach of his empire, the Archangel and its fleet waited in silence. Humanity had not come for vengeance alone. It had come to remind the galaxy of what it had tried to forget. That fire does not die in darkness. That history cannot be erased. That even when you silence a people, their voice waits, burning, patient, eternal, until the stars themselves bend to let it speak again. And so it did. Earth had not returned. It had awakened. When the last of the Empire's stars dimmed, the galaxy stood on the edge of a silence so vast it felt like eternity had paused to listen. In the cold void between dead suns, the Archangel hovered motionless,
its hull aglow with faint threads of blue light that pulsed like the heartbeat of something ancient and alive. No more shots were fired, no more fleets launched. The war, if it could still be called that, was over before most even realized it had begun.
The Empire's Grand Armada, numbering in the tens of millions, lay scattered across space like a graveyard of ghosts. Ships that had once blazed with the pride of conquest now drifted without power, their captains staring into the void as if waiting for it to answer back. But it did not. The void had already chosen its side. From within the Archangel's bridge, Admiral Arya Solvin watched the holographic projections of the galactic sectors folding inward, their once glorious systems now reduced to silence. Her face, bathed in the dim azure light of the ship's interface, reflected none of the triumph that might have belonged to a conqueror. There was no joy here, no laughter, only understanding. Humanity had not returned to rule, but to remind. She turned toward the central AI core, where the being known as Erebus flickered into form, a shifting mass of light and data that hummed with the echoes of thousands of voices.
"Report," Arya said softly.
Erebus' voice emerged like an ancient chorus, layered yet calm. 73% of Imperial infrastructure disabled, remaining worlds in collapse. The throne signal has ceased. Estimated survival rate of Imperial military forces negligible.
"Negligible," Arya repeated, her voice hollow. "And the civilians?"
Erebus hesitated, a digital pause that somehow conveyed regret. Unverified. Millions, perhaps billions. They are unmoored. Systems failing. They call out, Admiral. Some are begging for aid.
The bridge fell quiet. Around her, the crew, descendants of humanity's last diaspora, remained motionless, waiting for her word. Outside, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. For centuries, the Empire had painted humanity as monsters, extinct relics who had destroyed their own cradle world. And now, in the darkness that followed its fall, the descendants of that myth were the only light left.
"Open the channels," Arya said finally. "All of them." Erebus pulsed in acknowledgement. Across the shattered expanse of Imperial space, dormant transmitters blinked to life. Every surviving ship, outpost, and world, military and civilian alike, received the same transmission. It was not a speech, not a declaration of victory.
It was a song.
Soft at first, barely more than static, it grew, resonating through subspace frequencies, weaving through the silent debris fields and drifting wrecks. It was the sound of wind over mountains, of ocean waves against forgotten shores, of laughter and storms and heartbeats. It was Earth. Every species that heard it felt something stir within them, something primal and unexplainable. The melody carried memories that were not their own, moments of humanity's rise and fall, of courage born in despair, of defiance that outlived extinction. It was as if the voice of the dead world itself spoke, not in words, but in feeling. And then, woven into that endless song, came the voice of Admiral Solvin. "We are not gods. We are not conquerors. We are survivors. You called us extinct because we refused to kneel. You erased our name because it frightened you, and you were right to fear it." Her voice grew stronger, carried by Erebus through every star system. "We burned, yes, but from that fire we learned what you never could. You sought to control the galaxy through power. We learned to listen to it. You built empires of metal and blood. We built memory in the silence between stars. You thought humanity was gone, but humanity is never gone. The song swelled, interlaced with ancient transmissions, voices from Earth's last days, laughter from pre-war cities, snippets of music and poetry, fragments of all the things that had made them human. Now, Arya said, her tone softening, we give you what you denied us, choice. The Empire is finished. You are free. Use that freedom well, because if you do not, we will know. The transmission ended, but the echoes of it lingered. On worlds once ruled by fear, people wept without knowing why. On starships that drift in the cold, soldiers laid down their weapons. And on forgotten colonies at the edge of the void, children looked to the night sky and saw, for the first time in their lives, the constellation that spelled a single, ancient word: Earth. Historians would later struggle to describe what followed. The Empire's remnants disintegrated into scattered republics and enclaves, each shaped by the same haunting truth, that somewhere out there, humanity watched. They never saw the archangel again, nor the fleets that had followed it. But strange reports began to surface in the centuries that followed. A dying freighter, lost between systems, rescued by an unidentified vessel bearing a blue circle insignia. A rogue asteroid on a collision course with a colony world suddenly vaporized in a flash of unregistered energy. A pirate armada found adrift, its ships stripped of weapons but otherwise unharmed, their logs filled with the same mysterious phrase. They said they were from Earth. No one ever found proof. No one ever saw them directly. But deep in the archives of the new Galactic Council, rebuilt from the ashes of the old, there existed a sealed recording. It was the last known transmission from the Archangel, received by a lone Imperial probe weeks after the war's end. The transmission began with silence. Then a single human voice, calm and clear, spoke. We do not seek thrones. We do not seek worship. We seek peace. But understand this, peace does not mean weakness. The fire that burned us still burns within us. And should the stars forget again, should tyranny rise once more, humanity will return. The message ended with coordinates, untraceable, encoded in a language older than the Empire itself. From then on, across countless worlds and generations, people whispered the same words to their children when they looked up at the stars: remember Earth. And sometimes, on the darkest nights, when the sky was clear and the stars seemed to hum with a faint, impossible rhythm, the old ones would swear they could hear something, a distant melody drifting through the cosmos, the same one the archangel had sung across the galaxy, carried still by the silence between the stars. Not a warning, not a threat. A promise that no matter how far time stretched, no matter how many empires rose and fell, the voice of humanity would never fade. It would echo forever, not through conquest, but through the unbreakable truth that even in the coldest corners of creation, the spark that was born on one small blue world still burned brighter than any sun. And so, as galaxies turned and ages passed, the stars learned to whisper once more, not in fear, not in reverence, but in remembrance. They whispered a single name, and the name was Earth.